All right, everybody, peace. Welcome to the Sorry to Bother You NFL show, wherever or however you're listening. We're so grateful to have you here with us. As you guys know, I'm your host, Sean Cottle, and we've got some interesting stories we're going to be covering today, guys. One of those being perhaps the biggest story coming out of the NFL so far this week, and that's the Chicago Bears firing offensive coordinator Shane Waldron. And we're going to be discussing what this means for the Chicago Bears moving forward as an organization, and more importantly, what it means for Caleb Williams and his progression and development as a NFL quarterback. And in our second segment, guys, we're going to be discussing who is the biggest threat to the Detroit Lions in the NFC. So we're going to be discussing all this and then some, guys. Before we get started, be sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button as well, so you guys can stay up to date. Bless you. On all our latest content. And if you'd like to gain exclusive content from the Sorry to Bother You show, you can do so by going to patreon.com, click on the search bar, and typing in Sorry to Bother You show. That way you gain access to all of our exclusive content that we post daily. And with that being said, guys, let's go and get right into it, shall we? Like I said earlier, guys, perhaps the biggest news coming out of the NFL this week is the Chicago Bears firing offensive coordinator Shane Waldron. This coming after Caleb Williams' stark and drastic regression from the start of his season, in which he looked like an NFL-ready quarterback and perhaps in contention to win Rookie of the Year. But over the past 4 games, he has regressed drastically, despite Chicago having a depth offensive line and a number of pieces surrounding Caleb Williams. And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And what the Chicago Bears have done over the past decade with their top draft picks when it comes to quarterbacks have all had the same experience in terms of not preparing them in the best manner, particularly in their rookie season. We saw what happened with Mr. Trubisky. They fired the head coach under Mitch while Mitch was there, and they didn't give him the proper development. And we saw what happened with Justin Fields. Same thing, and now it's like the same thing's happening again with Caleb Williams. And if you're Chicago, you're not creating a foundation or stability for these guys. And when, as a young player, when you go into an organization or a program, there's instability and there's inconsistency, that can have an effect on your play style and your level of play, because everyone aligns with or becomes congruent with the culture and the energy of an organization. So if that energy and culture for organization is unstable, inconsistent, toxic, if you will, then that's what the players are going to become. And you can see that the main constant with organizations and programs that are toxic and unstable is that you get players that don't develop in the way they're supposed to develop, and that's where we get being a bust from. And so guys last 3 or 4 years in the program organization, and then they leave. And oftentimes, it can be too late for those players to regain that confidence that they had going into their rookie season. Some players do, though. Some players do rekindle that spark and find that confidence again and hit the peak and potential that they were originally meant to. But that's not always the case. And we saw with Mr. Trubisky, he was never able to truly get back to what Chicago thought he would be. And we're seeing it now with Justin Fields. We're uncertain with whether he will ever get to where Chicago thought he would be. And if Chicago does not want a repeat of Mitch Trubisky and Justin Fields, then they have to make changes within the organization within the culture. Because what's going to happen is that Caleb Williams is going to fall right in alignment with Mitch Trubisky and Justin Fields. And that will be such an underwhelming event if that was to take place, because based on, in my perspective, Caleb Williams is one of the most talented prospects that I've seen since I've started watching football 15, 16 years ago. And if you're Chicago and your intention is to, you want to create stability for Caleb Williams, I don't understand the purpose of firing the offensive coordinator at this point in the season. Because you fire your offensive coordinator and you bring an interim, or you have someone else calling plays, I don't understand the purpose of it, because now you're going to do this intermediary period for 8 weeks, and then you're just going to go in and hire another offensive coordinator. And so if you're Caleb Williams, or if you're an athlete player, you're thinking to yourself, okay, I'm not going to be fully invested into this coach or into this scheme, because we're only going to run it for 8 weeks, and then I'm going to have to learn something else. I'm going to have to learn something new. And so that lack of full commitment means that you're not going to get the best version of that player. And if there was ever any question marks next to Shane Waldron, then you should have changed that position. You should have let him go before the season even started. When it comes to the quarterback position, there cannot be any question marks. You have to be definitive, and you have to be resolute with their decisions when it comes to the quarterback position, because the quarterback position is the most important position in all of sports. You have no room for error. You have no room for misjudging anything. You have to be spot on when working with the quarterback position. And if there was any question marks with that offensive coordinator before the season started, because Caleb Williams had that playbook, he had their playbook at the combine, they gave it to him. So there was never any question that Chicago was going to draft Caleb Williams. So if you're Chicago and you had any question marks about Shane Waldron, you should have let Shane Waldron go before you drafted Caleb Williams. So now you let Shane Waldron go halfway through the season, and you bring in interim, and now what? You have to start over again. So now it's going to be 3 offensive coordinators potentially in Caleb Williams' first 2 years. That is a recipe for disaster for a quarterback. Something has to change within the Chicago Bears organization. And if it doesn't, you're going to get the same results over again. And Chicago has no one to blame but themselves, because they're choosing to put themselves in this position each and every single time. But let me know what you guys think. Leave your thoughts in the comment section. Do you guys agree with with my perspective on Chicago's insanity in doing the same thing when it comes to the quarterback development? Or am I missing something here? Am I missing something that Chicago is doing differently with Caleb Williams? Please let me know. I'm open to hearing all about it. But in our next segment, guys, we are going to be discussing just who the biggest threat is to the Detroit Lions in the NFC. So be sure to stick around for that, guys. You're not going to miss it. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. In case you missed the first segment of our show, we were discussing the state of affairs going on in Chicago with them firing offensive coordinator Shane Waldron. And in this segment, guys, we're going to be discussing just who the biggest threat is to the Detroit Lions in the NFC. And I've had a number of Philadelphia Eagles fans write in, message us and tell us that the Eagles are the biggest threat to the Detroit Lions, and of course, it's coming off their victory against the Dallas Cowboys. And my first thought process was to the Eagles fans that, well, you guys beat the Cowboys. What are you? That's what you're supposed to do, especially this season with obviously Dak being out and the defense playing far below expectations in Dallas, and just being a plethora of tumult and turmoil in that Dallas Cowboys organization. You're supposed to go in there and beat Dallas. What are you? Well, what else would I expect from the Eagles? And so that a lot of people's pick is to be Detroit's biggest threat in the NFC is the Eagles, and I don't agree with that particularly. I don't agree with that. I believe that Jalen Hurts is playing tremendously, and the secondary in Philadelphia has gotten much better from last year. Devontae Smith is, I believe, a top 5 wide receiver in my perspective in the NFL. You could argue top 3. And the addition of Saquon Barkley has added another threat to the offense. The offensive line, particularly in the passing game, has been much better as well. And Philadelphia is a great team. They're a good team. They'll probably win the NFC East in my perspective. I think they're better than Washington. However, I don't think they're the biggest threat to the Lions, because Philadelphia is still a little inconsistent, and I don't believe their peak is very high. When they're firing on all cylinders, I believe their peak isn't as high as who I think is the better threat to Detroit in the NFC. And I'll get to who I think that is in a minute. But Philadelphia's inconsistent play reminds me a lot of Baltimore. However, Baltimore's peak is much higher, I believe, than any team in NFL's. However, Baltimore is just wildly inconsistent, which is why they have the record they have right now. And Philadelphia, another team that is wildly inconsistent, and because their peak isn't as high, I don't believe that they are as big of a threat to Detroit. In my perspective, I believe actually Green Bay. I still believe Green Bay is the biggest threat to Detroit in the NFC, especially when Jordan Love gets healthy and they bring back Josh Jacobs, who's been injured for a large majority of the season. That adds another threat, particularly in running game. And that front seven in Detroit and in Green Bay has done a phenomenal job of stopping the run. Obviously Detroit, Green Bay has one of the best defenses in the league. I believe it's a top 10 defense scoring wise. And when Green Bay gets healthy, I believe they're the biggest threat. They're the biggest threat to Detroit. I believe Green Bay's peak, their full potential, I believe it's higher than that in Philadelphia. And due to the fact that they've been playing more consistently, or they can play more consistently than Philadelphia, I would take Green Bay right now over Philadelphia as the biggest threat to Detroit in the NFC. And then you have to throw Minnesota in there as well. However, Minnesota's ability to score the ball has provided a lot of question marks for me. And with Washington, when I watch Washington, it looks like something's missing. Are they a good team? Yes. But when we're talking about being one of the top 2, top 3 team in NFC, I don't see that from Washington. I still believe they're a piece or two away, particularly on an offensive end. They need a more consistent second option with Terry McLaurin to really make that offense elite. But the offensive line is tremendous. Obviously, Jaden Daniels did a great job of not turning the ball over. But I believe Washington is a tier below the Green Bays and Phillies. Detroit, Green Bay, and Philly are that top tier in the NFC. I think Washington is a step below that. And I think Minnesota is in that second tier as well with Washington. But in my perspective, I believe it's Detroit, Green Bay, Philly, Minnesota, and then Washington in order from top to bottom of the best teams in the NFC. But let me know what you guys think. What is your guys' perspective? What do you guys think is the biggest threat to Detroit in NFC? As of right now, is Detroit's conference to lose? I mean, you can make the argument that Detroit is probably the best team in the NFL right now, even ahead of Kansas City. And I mean, Detroit is just firing on all cylinders, and they're healthy, and they're only improving as the season goes along. And that's what you want as an organization, a team, player. You want to be peaking at the right time, especially when it gets into the postseason. And obviously, you want to remain healthy as well. Detroit looks good, man. I just don't think there's any team realistically that's going to be able to compete with Detroit in the postseason. And so, really, it's just a matter of who's playing for second at this point. But leave your thoughts in the comment section. I'm looking to hear all about it. But with that being said, guys, that's it for our show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's been a wonderful show. If you haven't already, please be sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button as well, so you guys can stay up to date on all of our latest content that we post daily. And if you'd like to gain exclusive content from the Sorry to Bother You show, you can do so by following us on Patreon, where we post exclusive content daily. With that being said, guys, we'll be back again same time tomorrow with our college football show. Until then, guys, continue to stay safe, be vigilant, make smart decisions, and peace.